All right. Okay, well, I'm really excited to be here with all these four great people. They love the number two leader in multiple capacities, whether that's a specific role with a specific title or the person and who they are. So Nathan and David are here, and they're the authors of How to Be Second. So Nathan, would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for the tee up, Maddie. It feels a little sports broadcastery right now. I'll ease into it. So I'm Nathan Young. I'm one of the authors of How to Be Second. The other author is right there. We really went about writing the book like we thought we were going to write it about the role. We felt along the way that we really discovered an identity. And part of that had to do with like, I've been in a lot of those different roles, fractionally, full-time, whatever, throughout the course of my career. And felt like I owned not just the role, but also it sort of encapsulated who I was as a person. So just awesome to get that experience. And then also when I discovered this book by Alec and the VisionSpark team, I was like, we need to have a conversation.
So yeah, I kind of backed into this work with Nathan. We were already friends, and then he was like, I might have a better chance of finishing this book if somebody else keeps me accountable. Like, you're semi-skilled. Like, I don't know, you want to help out? And part of the affinity that Nathan and I had that formed our friendship, in hindsight, was the thing that we wrote about. And I was like, oh, I kind of reverse engineered my life. I'm like, oh, I am this thing. So I had the aha moment in writing the book that a lot of people have when they read stuff like the books that we've written. So it was pretty cool. It's been kind of transformational for me. It's sort of given me a career boost and career focus. So I'm in a second role right now and really enjoy it. So it's a lot of fun. And I'm glad to be here with you two guys too as well. It's really fun.
We're happy to have you here in our home.
And on the VisionSpark team, we have our visionary and CEO, Alec Broadfoot, and his number two integrator duo, John Vidosh. If you guys would go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Sure. Yeah. So Alec Broadfoot, I've been the owner of VisionSpark for 13 years now. We got into the hiring of the number two space about 8 years ago, and I didn't realize how good our team was at finding those number twos until we did some research and some numbers, and so after 8 years or so, we've done over 200 placements of number twos with a 99% placement rate, which is, what are the chances of you hiring this person? And the industry average is about 60%, and ours is 99%. And then on the retention side, we're at 95%, where a lot of the other recruiters and search firms in the industry are between that 40 and 70% range. And so we do a lot of these. It's our specialty, and we enjoy doing them. We love working with our clients who need them. We love seeing the change that happens after they're in place and how much more freedom the owner has and the impact of the company. And then myself, I'm my own customer, and 3 years ago I decided to hire this wonderful man, John Vidosh. He makes things happen here at VisionSpark. I'll let you introduce yourself, John.
Yeah. Hi. Great to see you guys. Great to meet you guys today. My name's John Vidosh. It was interesting to learn that we have some 2 degrees of separation from some things that we've done in our past careers. So it's been really exciting. One of the things that I have found interesting and kind of what I say is, what's my role? What do I do? What's my job? And it's like, I've always said, I take things that are already there or in place and I make them bigger, better, stronger, faster. And up until recently, I'd never really heard, within the last couple of years, the term seconds, 2IC, integrator, all those kind of terms that were out there. And once I started to read books like the books that are out now, the books we're probably going to talk a little bit about later on in this discussion, it's like, that's me. That's who I am. So it was really exciting to put a slightly different name on the things that I've done throughout my entire career. I also found it interesting that me, at least, as kind of having those traits and skill sets around a second, is that I can take those, make it bigger, better, stronger, faster across a lot of different industries. I spent time in for-profit, not-for-profit, and apply those things that I think that I'm good at, that I enjoy doing, and help the businesses like VisionSpark. I've really enjoyed my almost 2.5 or almost 3 years now with VisionSpark, and so it's been great.
We talk about this all the time, and how sort of like one of the values of the second. We talk about it almost specifically from the role of the person, right? We're like, I just wrote the email for the community a couple of weeks ago, and I called us tomatoes. So I was like, first of all, in a lineup of fruits,
Tomatoes?
Tomato, right? Tomatoes, like they feel out of place, but they're actually that thing. And then, so they fit in the lineup, but you wouldn't think that. But then also like, would you ever make a tomato-based fruit salad? Like, no. And so like, where do they fit? It all feels a little odd as far as a fit, but they level up everything they're part of, right? And so you're like, well, I guess we should make a salsa. I guess we should make a sauce. I guess we should make it whatever. Like, oh, putting a tomato in that thing enhances all of the stuff. So anyway, now in the community, people are calling each other tomatoes, so that's fun.
And you got the whole idea of like ketchup, right? It's really the number 2 on the burger, right? You can't have a burger without ketchup.
Wow,
So,
I mean,
yeah.
now let's not fight, you know.
Mind blown.
Awesome. Well, as we have already seen, there's almost two sides to like the same coin of like the number 2, whether it's the role or like the person and how they identify. And so I kind of had a two-sided question for both parties that I would like to get your perspective on. So first, John and Alec, how do you feel about this idea of the identity of a second beyond the role? And similarly, David and Nathan, how do you feel about the second like as a role? What are your perspectives on those two different sides of that?
Yeah, so I'll go first. I think the identity of a number 2 leader or a second is, they love being behind the scenes, and they like to make things happen, make things work, and they don't need to be in the limelight, and it's okay if they are, but they actually would prefer somebody else being in the limelight. So I think they get their joy out of serving and supporting and solving problems. I remember, John and I, we did that exercise. It was like an activity inventory, and what I enjoyed and what he enjoyed were the exact opposite. And I was shocked to learn that he enjoyed, solving customer issues, employee issues, communication issues, all the things I did not enjoy doing. And so that was really cool to me, that I did hire the right guy.
I would say as Alec and I talked a little bit about this and prepared to have the discussion and greet you guys today, I said, do I really need to do this? To Alec's point about, I'm not, it's not important for me to be out in front. And so, having these kinds of discussions and sharing this, I love to do it, and I'll step up to the plate when asked, but it's not a burning thing that I have that says, hey, I got to get out there and shout from the rooftops, I'm an integrator and this is why. But if asked, I'm more than happy to enter into a dialogue with people.
Well, thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Obviously, it's important for us to like make sure, not necessarily that you're on camera, but like that there's a sort of equal time given, right? And so like it's really easy to highlight the leader who is often required to be in the limelight, sort of like whether you want to or not, right? Like
that's
it's
Alec.
almost like like the role demands it of you to a certain extent, and we were okay, well, you need to be all the time, and you are equally important. Let's every now and then in the right space, like let's try this out.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things in occupying second roles, being a second and occupying second roles, there's always press, right? No matter whether you're like, I am this thing, and then you go to do the role that you're actually paid to do, and there are things that you're like, you just don't fit as well as you'd like. I prefer to think of secondness as kind of a fuzzy set in terms of like identity characteristics and roles you end up occupying. Because we can kind of fit, we're kind of that drawer in the kitchen that has everything in it. And you're like, if I can't find something, I'm going to go to that drawer.
We're the Swiss Army knife.
We're the Swiss Army knife.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, but with that, if you're working on something, you want not always, a Swiss Army knife is not always the best tool to use. It can do a lot of things. So you still have to develop and fill out some of these roles. So I think about some of the roles I've had and I'm like, I like so much about this, but still we end up being extended credibility as well, where we're like, you're really good at figuring stuff out. So we're just going to roll the dice that even the areas that you don't fill out super well organically by your personality, the other part of your personality is going to push in and figure that out. So I've definitely been in that press, and I think that's been good for my professional development, where seconds, to me, I also would prefer to just do the things that I want to do. A lot of times where I'm like, oh, I would rather get in the weeds on this. And sometimes we do have to switch level a little bit.
Yeah. How do you feel about this idea of really, so I'll get really specific on it, of going, okay, there's the role. And so like your book, Hiring Your Right Number 2 Leader, right? So this very specifically talks about the second in command position within an organization. And I won't say like for-profit, nonprofit, like any organization, right? A grouping of humans together doing something. And we're really getting at the idea that that's sort of like a glove. There's a role there, but you can put anything into a role. You could put a person in there, you could put a dog in there, whatever, right? Like on some level, I've seen some states, like I remember the first time I made that joke, and then I was like, I wonder if a dog ever has been mayor. Yeah, like 13 times.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, and reelected.
He did a great job.
Yes. Apparently his bark was way better than his bite. And so, but this idea that like, so one is a role, and putting the right person into that role is so critical. And also that person exists whether they have the role or not. Right? So like,
They're out there. Yeah.
you can have the role, and when you do, then you do, and they're together. But when you don't have the role, are you still that person at the end of the day? And so that's really what I like. How does this idea of like, John, you're John, whether you get this job or not, and those two things are completely separate. How does this resonate with you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think John is John in the role or outside the role.
Yeah. I mean, I think about even as I was younger, before I ever had to be employed and fill some sort of role, I just think about, just the things that I would, and how I would interact with my friends, and the kind of the roles and responsibilities that I would take on. And even at an early age, it was like, you do this, you do this, you do this. And this is how it's all going to come together, and it's going to be beautiful. And it could be anything from organizing a game of touch football to whatever. And just kind of naturally came to me. It's like, hey, let's move this thing forward. Let's stop talking about it. Let's just do it.
And I would ask the same question, Alec, in your book, you mentioned like, you specifically use the phrase, a tiger can't change his stripes. And it feels like you're talking a lot about yourself also. And so how often do you think this sort of like idea of the job and the traits that you have when you're a natural fit for that sort of get conflated? Because it seems like what you were saying about yourself is that you were this person and you ended up in the role almost inevitably. Does that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of visionaries or owners don't realize that the importance of having a number two. I think a lot of them, it's part of their identity. It's they see that their busyness, the craziness is who they are, and they just need to work harder, work longer. But it is part of their identity. And, I didn't really I saw the benefits of my clients of having that number two. One particular client, they were on the East Coast. We helped them find a number two. I couldn't get a hold of this individual, the client, after we placed the person. I was really curious as to, how they're getting along and what's going on. And, long story short, the reason why I couldn't get a hold of him is him and his wife were traveling the world. and they had all this free time. And so I mean, there's story after story where I would see that. And then I saw it in my own, when I hired John, where, you know, all of a sudden my energy went through the roof. Right. And it went, and I reflected, it was one of the reasons why energy went through the roof is because I wasn't doing things I wasn't good at. Right. So I didn't like solving customer issues or employee issues or communication issues or writing emails or all that. And so my joy went up as well because I wasn't doing that work either. So I think a lot of times visionaries don't realize, you know, that the grass is greener on the other side when you have a number two. And to really set it up well is you want your number two to run your business or organization, you know, and then you're freed up to make a big impact on your company, whether it's through selling to big clients and big relationships, collaborations, solving bigger company problems. And so it's given me a lot more time and a lot more freedom, right? And entrepreneurs are attracted to the word freedom, right? Dan Sullivan talks about the 4 freedoms of time, freedom of money, freedom of purpose, and freedom of relationships. And so you really don't have the benefit of having that, those freedoms without having that number 2 in place.
I would say, yeah, as far as, you know, the question about changing your stripes, and to kind of echo what Alex said, is that, you know, we oftentimes, and when we are working with clients and looking for their seconds, we have some tools that we use to do that. And oftentimes what we find is that you can flex, just like you did. You can flex to that role, but boy, is it draining. Boy, do you not enjoy it. And so in most cases, people can flex, but at the end of the day, you're worn out. And so if it's not in your natural kind of skill set or traits or seconds kind of role, it gets old after a while. And at some point you go, I just can't keep doing this. I've got to find a better solution.
I represent your remarks, right? Because like, so with How to Be Second as an organization, I'm the first in command. So I'm literally like chief second. Like, what is that even? How do you?
You're the first second.
Yeah. But not in rank. But this idea of like, I talk about this openly with like the How to Be Second community, right? I'm like, well, a role is very much like a jacket that you put on, because you can take a jacket off, and that the jacket itself, the role, does not confer traits on you as a person, right? We bring our traits to roles, as you guys are very well aware. And so I wear the jacket of the first in command, and it does not fit my body well. Like it's like a little bit like this.
Makes you itchy.
Yeah. And so I talk a lot. We talk a lot, and it's in our book. Several times we talk about the difference between competence and energy, and it feels like you guys are both hitting on that too, which is like, well, I can flex into that thing. I can be competent. I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't want to live in that. Like the jacket fits so weird. It starts eventually.
I can wear it for an hour.
Yeah. It starts to feel like a straight jacket. So anyway.
I mean, this conversation around energy is really interesting because in some ways, I'm going to throw out an unpopular word, at least in my world. It's overused, is the idea of sort of having, it's sort of privilege, right? Like a lot of people don't get to think about energy in their work. Like you get a job, you get the best job that you can, the one that pays the best. But in defense of what we're saying around energy, especially when you're a first or second in command, we don't end just with us. It's not like we bear the discomfort just in our body, right? Where there are other people that feel the discomfort of Alec running out of energy, right? Vision starts to die. There's literally no vision spark. There's nothing sparking up with vision. Things like you're a culture setter. A lot of people are lining up behind you. It has implications, much like I deal in the world of mental health a lot. A lot of us think that our mental health ends at our fingers and toes. And it shows up in systems and radiates out in ways that if we're not cognizant of it, then it's just pinging around the organization or around the system, right? So it really does matter when you're operating out of your lanes of energy for too long a period of time, because it doesn't just drain you, it drains your organization, it drains your company. So I know it's like when I hear this, there's this like knee jerk where I'm like, a lot of people have to work in places that don't give them energy, and but I'm like, but this one can make things a lot worse for a lot of other people. There's that domino effect of systems and that reach where it's more than your own subjective feelings of exhaustion or exuberance because you got to sit with spreadsheets all day and run models and things like that. That stuff radiates out. It really does.
And visionaries, maybe some of them are a little more self-effacing where they don't believe they deserve to have a number two, right? Or they can't afford to have a number two. And we've seen that time and time again where, what you pay that number two, you're going to reap back in both top line and bottom line. It's really getting in touch with, okay, what's your reasoning why? Is it money? Well, hey, if you're going to get a return on what you pay this person, then money's not an issue. Is it time? Well, they're going to create more time for you, right? Is it purpose? Like, are you concerned about your identity? Because we've had some of our clients are concerned, like, well, what am I going to do? What are the employees going to think of me if I don't, do this, right? But you're actually driving your employees crazy because you're doing a lot of things you shouldn't be doing and you're not doing them well. And they want you to do they want you to be doing your unique ability. Like, where can you have the biggest impact? And, I know a lot of teams that, when the visionary comes to office, they're like, uh-oh, right? So what's he or she going to do now to create more mess? I think they call that in the rocket fuel book, the Seagull visionary, or they come in and they crap over everything and leave. And I don't think I do that anymore. But
I was like, is this an impromptu poll?
Yeah. Maybe it's just more targeted crap. I don't know.
It's definitely more targeted. Yeah. So
bullseye small.
Yeah. So, there's really not a lot of refutable arguments that a visionary can have that why they shouldn't have a number two.
The thing that it dawned on me as you were talking, Alec, and I interviewed for a second in command role at an organization that I know very well. And I was reading the job description and I was like, the job descriptions for these type of roles are actually referendums on what's wrong with the company right now. So it's like, oh, this role is actually just because it's missing. We didn't have one. This is just what's wrong with the company. And I said, to the point where I said to these people, I was like, this isn't so much a job description as a prayer request. This is like, you're hoping like everything gets fixed, like this is a silver bullet or some sort of panacea. But when a visionary is not operating or just missing, and the second in command is just missing, that is an indictment. You can tell what's wrong with your organization by fleshing out that role. You could say, oh, we're not just missing this role. Our organization is just missing this. We have a problem. Like, that's the level that those roles go to. And that's a real case for the second as well. Because you're looking around like, our organization has problems. I need to work harder. I need to knuckle down, work more hours. You're just like, no, if I wrote everything down that's wrong, it turns out that's a job description for a second.
And with my own journey, before John came on board, I was in 3 seats in the company. So I was in the visionary seat, I was in an integrator seat, and I was in the finance seat. So I was in 3 seats. And so I said, okay, I'm going to grade myself. So as a visionary, probably C-. As an integrator, D or F for sure. As a CFO, probably a B, And, what would my organization be like if I could be an A visionary and if we had an A integrator and an A CFO? And so that was one of the things that helped me come to the conclusion I needed to hire a full-time integrator.
Yeah. This is something, so as we have a theme here, obviously running, which is this idea of the identity outside of any role, right? Because something that we've pressed into, and it seems like we're all in alignment on, is that John would be John wherever John is. And so my wife also is like, I'm a second, right? So she claims the identity of this thing that we've discovered. And she has been a chef, and I would say still is, for all, I think she's better now than she used to be, but she was the executive chef at a country club. She was a pastry chef. She now has recently graduated from a school for spiritual direction. She is the mother of both of our children and takes care of them, right? So she does all of those things while staying at home, which I'm like, I work. She's interesting. But she is this thing, and she brings that to every single place that she is, because she's bringing her to where she is. She's never been a second in command, ever, in any of this stuff. Not by title. And so, but she's bringing her. Samantha brings Samantha wherever she goes. And so as we're pushing into this idea of identity, something that came up sort of like again and again was that it seemed like there was a big chunk of the community who would raise their hand and be like, yes, I identify with all of these things you're saying about a person. That's me. And then there was like this division. And it was weird. It was like almost like the tighter we got on the idea of an identity, the more that we found this rift start to tear apart. And actually, David and I experienced this thing. And so we finally were like, you're this thing, we agree. I'm this thing, we agree. We are wildly different. And it seems like people are starting to fall into your camp or my camp, but we're all under the same umbrella. What do we do? And so the language we gave it was 2 and then 2IC. Originally, we were like, we thought we were writing a book about how to do the best at frankly, the COO role. That's the title that we had targeted. And we ended up writing a book about identity. And then over the course of that, we felt like we found 2 different people. And so I'm a 2IC and Dave is a 2. And Dave, could you just speak more eloquently than I can to the distinction?
So if you're a Venn diagram person, there's significant overlap between the two. So it's not like Nathan and I get together and just drive each other crazy, just moderately crazy. So, I mean, I think of things like, Nathan and I often talk about second C in dominoes. We see in implications where it's like, when you're raising a toddler and you're like, they start moving across the room and you're like, oh, I see this is going to happen. Like tears are coming, like electrocution's coming, like bruises are coming. Yes, let's cut this off. We just do that organizationally where we're like visionaries, like, beating chest and getting excited. And we're like, no, let's talk about that. Let's filter that a little bit. But we see in systems, processes, I think a 2 sees systems and a 2IC might really hold together in their mind systems of systems, right? They see across all systems a little bit better, a little bit differently. One of the distinctions that Nathan and I have found, we're both self-effacing. So you got to take some of our critiques of ourselves with a grain of salt, because seconds are really critical of themselves. Typically, we call it knowing what 10 is, where somebody might come up to you and be like, Alec, you're amazing at being a second. And you're like, you know who's really good at being a second? Like, I'm an imposter. Like, I'm a 4. If you really knew what was going on, if you knew, Art or Jane across town, they're an 8 and I couldn't tie their shoes. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah. So we're pretty self-effacing, but one of the things that Nathan will say is like, I prefer processes to people. Like, I don't want to coach people. Like, 2s tend to coach people more. They really want to shepherd a team, gather a team. They're really good for culture at that micro person-to-person level. 2ICs are good for the organizational culture. They're good at setting things up and making sure people don't hit roadblocks, that people downstream can have good teams and good communication, things like that. That might be a gross oversimplification, but those are 2 things that I think about a lot when Nathan and I actually talk about rubber meets the road distinctions between 2s and 2ICs. Some of it has to do with how far you see ahead as well, in terms of you might want to tell them about the valley and when do you see, just a little bit, and bring up that concept, because I think that is a 2IC distinction a little bit.
Yeah. We say all the time, like a 2 in all situations, seconds want to care for their teams. Always. We're always trying to do what's best for our teams to create clarity, everybody moving forward together, alignment. Like, we're always seeking those things, right? We're sense makers. And so we always want to be doing that. And 2 ICs tend to take care of their people by finding systems, and they find people through systems. 2s tend to find people and then build systems for their people. And it really is coming to a similar thing, but coming at it kind of from the left door or the right door. And so we've created this distinction, and our community seems to be falling into those bucket, like sort of self-selecting. And then there's a lot of also like little things that go along with that. We tend to call 2 ICs cats because we're kind of jerks. And like, we have I'm sort of realizing how much insider language we have. But this idea of the when do you see thing, and this is in our book, we have this kind of graph, and what we called out was not necessarily your ability to think long term, but what presses on your mind as the most important thing right then. And we found that for 2s, in our case, so like of the whole umbrella of seconds, there's 2s on this side and 2 ICs on this side, and the overlap is pretty substantial. But 2s tend to see, in that implication stage, they tend to see like a few weeks, a few months, and that's where the pressure in their mind lives. So they'll wake up that day and they'll be thinking about what they need to do that day because of what's about to happen in 2 weeks or what's about to happen in a month. That's what will be weighing on them. That's how important they perceive what they need to get done that day. 2 ICs tend to live further out. So like, I wake up in the morning thinking about what's going to happen 9 months to a year from now. And that's what gives me anxiety about my current day. I wake up being like, the dominoes need to fall and I need to do this stuff today because will be true in a year. And I have a really hard time understanding the importance of today because of that. Like, I lose the relevance of the day, which also means that I tend to kind of disappear for my team. I'm not very personable in that sense. And I just think that has seemed to play out consistently. So that's the idea of the 2 and the 2 IC. Obviously, I have no idea how you get. I mean, like,
and one of the images we tend to use, because you can bring the visionary in as well. We use fog lights, glow beams, and high beams of a car. So the 2 is kind of like the fog lights, like you see closest to the car if you've ever used them. Glow beams further out, and high beams like further out still. And we tend to use those images to talk about like what is illuminated for each of those roles, but they do blend together. It's not like a sharp line, but there's
yeah. And we kind of make the joke. Forgive us, Alec. We kind of make the joke all the time that natural visionaries. Somebody is going to yell at me for saying that word. That set of words. Tend to see like right now. Like, I remember hearing this story about Howard Schultz calling somebody and being like, this one letter, the lights in this letter on this one store are out. Why? But then also, so like they see like the critical, and it actually makes you an incredible product manager, right? Like, you understand the customer experience, like to the nth detail. And then also like way out here and sort of like not incompetent, but a little bit blind into the middle bit. And so anyway,
So we see that all the time, like what you're describing. We actually see it through our assessment tool. So visionaries are by nature not, and we'll use the term organization. And what I mean by organization is kind of what you're talking about, is how far out in the future, right? So visionaries tend to be of the immediate, like now, right? They have an idea now and they want to see it implemented now, right? Use that Howard Schultz example, right? Where there are several indispensable traits that a second in command has to have. And so one of which is that organization component, where they are thinking more long-term. So they think 6 months out, a year out. They value planning They value the weekly meetings and the quarterly meetings, and they put together a plan, and they want to stick to the plan as much as possible. Good ones are willing to adapt the plan along the way, where, visionaries that, don't, the plan's there, but it's meant to be changed. So here's a new idea, and we need to change the plan. Right. We also see it in terms of the way they manage the day. So as someone who's lower in organization, I'm not thinking weeks out or months out. I'm thinking, okay, what do I have to do today? Maybe I'm thinking a little bit about next week, where John, you're thinking weeks and months and a year out, and you're thinking, you put together an amazing budget, and it's a budget for the year. Right. And, so that is in there. And then you were also talking about, Howard Schultz noticing that light out. And so we see that in our assessment. We see that visionaries tend to be more sensitive. So that's our superpower and our kryptonite. So it's our superpower in the fact that we understand the needs of the customer, right? Howard Schultz saw the need for a coffee shop in Seattle and great coffee. I saw the need in the marketplace that there really needs to be a search firm that uses science and data in placing people for long-term success. And so that's where my sensitivity is. And I probably would notice if the light on VisionSpark was out front or whatever, if the V was missing, I would be on that right away. Let's get that fixed. But our sensitivity in that also makes us really bad at hiring great people. And so we have a hard time being objective. We tend to side with employees. And so, what's great about John is he looks at what's best for the business, right? So let's put the needs of the business first. And so he does a great job with me in terms of, okay, Alex, shift your sensitivity from this particular employee to what's best for the business, right? So it's statistically there. The data is there to prove a lot of what you just said.
Well, I'll take it.
Yeah.
So what I would say is the nuances that you pointed out between a 2IC and a second, I'm going to need some couch time because I've got a bit of an identity crisis there because I see some of those. And so is there something in between that? Because I see some things that you describe on both sides of that.
To be fair, we have like a 90-point list in the book.
Okay, so get the book and read the book, right?
So it's a fuzzy set. So it's more than less. It's not a bright line. It's like, oh, I shift this direction. I think Nathan and I are sort of bad examples because Nathan is like the 2IC. I see as 2IC. Like he's like the poster child, and I'm more of like second. So we create more of an artificial division than there is. They look like really bright line distinctions, and they do show up in bright line distinctions in some facets. But the second umbrella is still sort of the strongest principle organizing it.
I mean, we're really talking about 5-10% slivers on either side of an overlapping, right? I think the Venn diagram image that I'm talking about is also in the book.
But they're significant and they're interesting. The perspectives that you called out.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I think from what I see, we have indispensable traits that we want to see every 2IC to have. And so they need to be a strategic thinker, problem solver, critical thinking. We talked about organization. They need to be process oriented. They need to love to manage and hold people accountable, right? So I think that last one may be something that separates a 2IC from a 2, because a 2IC wants direct reports. They want to coach them. They want to lead them. They want to hold them accountable, where some 2s may not want people working for them, right?
So this will be our first moment of me being like, no, I don't want to, I wouldn't say that. And so what I would say is, it feels like you're poking at this. So are you familiar with the integrator continuum that came out from Keystone, whatever they're called now? Okay. There was this thing that they came out with that was like a continuum thing. I've had I will go on record once again saying I have a massive issue with this. Like fundamentally, I looked at it and I was like, oh, you're just wrong.
Two IC. Yeah.
Don't care what you think. You're wrong.
Right. Well, that's nice. No. So now, obviously, that it's stuff like there's lots of nuance. Stuff can be two things. I'm sure there's a substantial element of us both being right. And also, my gut reaction was nope. And that is, so once again, if two ICs come in from and again, we're talking about identity here, right? As much as we can. If two ICs are approaching managing their teams largely through systems, I think that, and because they tend to see a little further out, that gets perceived as being more strategic often, I think. So again, like you're the scientists on this. This is what I'm saying from what we've discovered on our own interviews in the community. And I'm definitively worse with people. Accountability, I'm all in. Management?
So we're going to have you take our assessment tool and we can see where you fall. But and earlier I mentioned process orientation, that is also their orientation towards systems, right? So we want a 2IC, an integrator, to be able to develop systems and implement systems in the organization, right? So that's how organizations grow and scale with systems. Yeah.
I would say, so Dave, as who says like, oh, between these two things, he is a 2 and I'm a 2IC, right? And Dave is a 10x manager by comparison to me. I think that I have a systems brain, I think, in that way. And I can wear the first in command jacket probably with a lot longer tolerance. I'm willing to sort of like forge the path. I'm willing to hold people accountable. I like to say that I'm not good at confrontation, but I am willing. And Dave is definitively a better manager, but I would say like leader of teams.
So we're going to need you both to take the the talent impact profile assessment, because you'll be able to see something, and then we can actually compare it to, you know, the hundreds of other 2ICs that we've placed to see where you fall. Because, you know, when we came up with these templates based on early on at VisionSpark, we were okay at placing integrators. We weren't amazing at it. But also we had other companies that had integrators in place that weren't succeeding. And so we were able to see what were the issues. You know, it was right there and with data. The data just screamed off the charts. And I'm like, okay, the reason why this integrator is struggling is because they're really low in organization, or they don't want to coach and hold people accountable and lead. And so it's right there in the data. So there may be, you guys may be on either side of that.
Okay, so based on just some the distinctions that we just went through, let's talk a little bit about the idea of Batman and Robin versus Batman and Alfred.
So I want to tee this up just a smidge more, and that is, but John, I really want to hear from you on this, because we were talking about this right before we actually turned all the recording stuff on, and it felt like you got there like right away. And so if, just to give them sort of titles, Batman is the first in command, and then what else is going on? And I'll just hand it to you.
So I think Robin is the supporting actor. So I'm not sure Robin's role exactly. I think he's there as a second set of hands.
Executive assistant,
Maybe. But when I looked at that and when I first saw that, and it's like, I think the right answer is supposed to be Batman's the visionary, Robin's the second, and Alfred's not in the equation. But I said, that's not how I see it. I see it as Batman is the visionary. Not sure Robin's role right now. Want to learn more about it, but I see Alfred as the second. I mean, he just seemed, as I reflect on, watching Batman and Robin growing up as a youngster, the things that Alfred did. He kept the trains running. He kept them organized. He was kind of the go-to.
He ran the business.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't help myself. We call that role first in training.
Robin's role
is first in training. And we've actually seen this. actually, it would probably be very common to the two of you. So like large companies use the title COO effectively as a holding room for succession, right? So IBM did this 5 or 6 times. They may still do this. I'm not familiar with their practices right now, but lots of larger companies. And so if you read the book Riding Shotgun, The Misunderstood Role of the COO, they walk through a ton of interviews with COOs of larger companies. And they actually talk a lot about the distinction between the real life of what they call a real COO, a natural COO, and then like this holding room that gets created for eventual CEO. And so Batman and Robin is a false pairing. It's a one and a one eventually. And Alfred is the second in command the whole time. So people think, and I think I'm getting to something that you see in hiring all the time. So that's why I was like especially curious. What we see is firsts who go, I need someone with me. I need a pairing. I need something.
The sidekick.
Yes,
the sidekick.
Right. And so they get a Robin who is them. They get them round 2.
Mistake number 1.
Mistake number 1.
Yeah.
I hired myself. So
Yeah.
Batman gets Robin. Batmobile runs out of gas.
Right.
Right? I'm pretty sure that's an episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now that I've explained every time I bring up this idea, I don't even say Alfred anymore. I say, well, people think of it like Batman and Robin, and then if you're the person, you understand, like John, like you got there. I didn't even say anything anymore. You just made the leap immediately. And so I'll hand it back over to you and say, like, this is what we have seen. We call it out in the book. How does this unfurl for you guys?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Alfred is the number 2. Yeah. And I think Robin is I like that example, first in training or an executive assistant, or, we've worked with companies that need innovation managers, and they are, I don't know if you've heard of the Dan Sullivan talks about make it up, make it real, make it recur. Have you heard of this concept? So the visionaries make it up, and then you need someone to make it real, and then you need someone to make it recur, right? And so in some organizations, you want that number 2 to make it real and make it recur. In other organizations, you need someone else to make it real, right? So if Thomas Edison's to make it up, then there's someone that runs the lab for Thomas Edison's. They're the ones that make it real. And then you start a company like General Electric and they make it recur, right? And so there's that whole paradigm. So yeah, I don't think Robin is the number 2 at all. And so, in fact, the recent movies don't really feature Robin anywhere in it. So
when I saw that, I thought we were going to have a big debate today about that. And it's like, no, don't see it. Don't
we got there immediately.
Don't see Robin. Don't agree.
I would push too into, you've mentioned like maybe Robin is sort of like this executive admin. And I would actually push that the best executive admins are seconds by identity. And they either don't have capacity or they would make eventual great second in commands eventually, right? Maybe they're developing professional capacity, which might be really early in your career.
Yeah.
Although I will say some of the best executive admins I've ever seen that's like, this is what I do.
Yeah.
COO is never a title I aspire to, but this is as good as this gets. So
yeah.
Anyway, but I would say Robin is not an EA either. Robin would never be willing.
No. Not from an ego standpoint.
Yeah.
And executive assistants, that's your first critical hire, right? If you don't have an assistant, you are the assistant. So when you're a growing company, you need a good executive assistant. And you need someone, the way I describe when we hire executive assistants for our clients is that you want an executive assistant that can manage you as the visionary, not you manage them, right? So that is your first critical hire is the executive assistant. Yeah.
To bring in another person who is I aspire to be this person's friend. I think you are this person's friend, which is Emily Morgan.
Yeah.
Delegate Solutions, right?
Yeah.
She has like that personal project manager
Correct.
idea.
Yeah.
Like what a freaking genius move that, right? Like, oh my gosh. So
Yeah,
it
so
feels
that's
like you're
that
speaking
that's
right to
that innovation manager position. That's where, you know, a visionary has an idea and he needs someone to go into the lab and you know, make sure it's a legitimate idea and then get it done, right? So Emily's concept is, you know, any of these side projects where if you don't have resources tied up, you need some additional resources, and that's where her company comes to mind. Where, you know, you just call them and say, hey, you know, I want to start this new XYZ, you know, and that's where you hire that company.
Which to me, sorry, it looks like you're. Oh, I was going to say.
I wanted to ask a question.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Okay, so if Robin was sitting in the room with us today, and you asked him, I want to know either one of your perspectives. If you were to ask him, what did he think his role was, or his skill sets, or his traits, or how do you think he would answer?
I have my answer. I mean, I've always had my answer.
So go ahead. So I'm not.
Not contemplated that one.
I mean, it's to be
I haven't
Batman
watched it.
eventually. It's right, and that's I'm a comic nerd. I can't help it. Like, not as much as my friend Darren, but like, I mean, in all of the arcs outside of whatever slapsticky type things existed before I was born, which I've watched, but he becomes Nightwing, or he becomes Red Mask, or he becomes his arc in everything is he becomes the first in command eventually. Every single time he becomes Batman, he becomes Batman Beyond, he becomes right. Like, so Robin would say, well, I'm supposed to become Batman. Eventually Bruce is going to get tired and then I'll take the cape. Right. And if he doesn't say that, then he goes off on his own.
Yeah, I mean that's the basic. I was overthinking it. I'm like, but yeah, that's basically it as I understand the distinction. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, you know, we talk about the problems that we force people, you know, when we're hiring, and if you want to get promoted, you want more money, you might have to pass through some really weird things where it's like, I'm going to be COO, but I really am a first in training, but that's the next step. That's the next step. And the way we hire and the way we staff, it's like these things aren't one contiguous ladder where, you know, you just get promoted through. It's like it's a really bad idea, or it really can be. So yes, like it wouldn't be like, you know, Alfred's not sitting around like, boy, I want Robin's job. And Robin's like, I want Batman. It's like, no, like they go up different places. Like,
Well, thank you to all four of you for being here today. This has been a really helpful conversation. If somebody wants to continue the conversation, Alec and John, how do they get in touch with you?
So our website is visionsparksearch.com, or they can send an email to discover@vision-spark.com.
Perfect. David and Nathan, if somebody wants to get in touch and learn more about the identity rather than the role, how do they get in touch with How to Be Second?
You teed that up so well. Our website is howtobesecond.com. Or you can find either of us on LinkedIn. Like I spend a lot of time, too much time on LinkedIn. So just find me on there. If you type in Nathan Young, I'm the first one. My face is like, it's pretty easy to spot me.
yeah, that pretty much covers it. Website's good point of access, and I'm on LinkedIn. I respond to messages. I'm not on it like you are, but yeah, you can reach me through there. It's great.
And do you guys each want to announce your book titles one more time, just in case anybody didn't get to see that?
Sure. Well, this is Nathan's book and David's book, How to Be Second. And then our book is Hiring Your Right Number 2 Leader.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here.
Oh,
Thanks.
And thanks for
Great
hosting
talking to you
us.
guys.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. Yep.